All right, let's just jump right into it. Today's explainer is all about a seriously fascinating ancient Indian logical framework called Lakshana. We're going to see how this philosophy takes something we do every single day, just defining an object, and turns it into an incredibly rigorous, exact science. It's basically about how we know what we know and how we can prove it without a shadow of a logical doubt. Pretty cool, right?
So to kick things off, I want to throw a really basic question your way. How do you define a cow? Now, I know, it sounds like a ridiculous question, kind of like something you'd ask a toddler, but seriously, take a second, pause, and really think about the exact, precise characteristics that make a cow fundamentally a cow. What separates it from literally every other animal on the planet?
Well, if you're like most people, you probably jump straight to things like, oh, it has horns, or it has spots, right? But here's the crazy part. According to the ancient texts we're breaking down today, those answers are totally flawed. They actually leave a massive gaping hole in our logic. The historically precise answer they give? Having a dewlap, that fold of loose skin hanging from the neck. Let's dig into exactly why our common answers completely fail and why the dewlap is the real winner here.
Section 1. The anatomy of a perfect definition.
To wrap our heads around this, we've got to look at the intellectual tools given to us by the ancient philosopher Sri Jayatirtha and his commentator Srinivasa Tirtha. Basically, they say if you want to understand and talk about absolutely anything in the universe, you need two distinct things. First up is the lakshya. Think of the lakshya as simply your target subject. It's the specific thing we want to define. In our running example, it's our humble cow. You've got to lock onto your target before you can even begin to describe it.
And that brings us to the second requirement, the lakshana. This is the definition itself, but it's not just any description. It's a highly specific, totally unique attribute that perfectly defines your subject. It's the defining mark, like our cow's dewlap, that exists only in our subject and absolutely nowhere else in the entire world.
Now, digging just a little deeper into the text, Srinivasa Tirtha makes this really fascinating grammatical point. He notes that the original text uses the word lakshya in what's called the locative singular. Okay, so why does that matter to us? Well, it means we have to define one specific individual first. It's honestly like a detective putting all their focus on one single suspect before looking at the whole gang. In this philosophy, you don't start by trying to define some massive abstract concept of universal cowness. You define one specific individual cow and then use similarity, or sadrisha, to understand all the others of that exact same kind.
Section 2. The rules of exclusivity.
So, to build a true definition, your core concept has to obey two incredibly strict rules. The text calls this lakshya vyaptya vartamanatvam. First, you have yapti, or invariable concomitance. Big words, I know, but it simply means your defining attribute must be present in every single instance of your subject. Period. No exceptions. Second is exclusivity. That attribute must not exist in absolutely anything other than your subject.
And this completely exposes why we have to throw out our earlier answers like horns or color. Think about it. If you define a cow as having horns, you're breaking the rule of exclusivity because buffaloes have horns too. If you define it as white, well, you break invariable concomitance because obviously not all cows are white. A true definition has to be an uncommon attribute, an asatara dharma. The dewlap is the ultimate example here because it easily passes both tests. It's found in all cows, and it is only found in cows.
Moving right along to Section 3, the three logical fallacies.
Now we're going to put our definitions to a sort of philosophical Goldilocks test. We need to make sure our arguments are intellectually flawless by avoiding three big doshas, or logical fallacies. Number one is ativyapti, or overprovision. This is when your definition is just too broad, like the horns example we just talked about, bleeding over into buffaloes. Number two is avyapti, or underprovision. This means your definition is too narrow, like saying a cow is black or lean, which unfairly leaves out all the brown or plump cows. And number three, asambhava, or impossibility.
Let's zoom in on that last one for a second. Defining a cow as having a single hoof. The absurdity of this, the asambhava fallacy, is actually pretty funny, isn't it? But it serves as a stark, brilliant reminder of a core logical truth. If the attribute you're using to define your subject simply doesn't exist in the subject at all, your entire argument instantly collapses. You literally cannot define something by a trait it fundamentally lacks.
Section 4. The ultimate purpose.
Okay, so why do we go through all this rigorous, exhausting intellectual trouble just to describe a farm animal? The ultimate payoff happens in two really definitive steps, known as lakshana prayojana. First is vyavriti, or separation. By establishing a perfect definition, we completely separate the signal from the noise. We distinguish our object not just from wildly different things like a pot or a piece of cloth, but also from similar things, like a horse. And second is vyavahara, or naming. Only after we've cleanly separated it do we actually earn the fundamental logical right to confidently point at reality and call the object by its specific name. You simply cannot accurately name what you cannot perfectly define.
And that brings us to the real weight of this whole ancient framework. I want to leave you with this final provocative thought. If it takes this much exacting, rigorous logic, avoiding over-provision, under-provision, and absolute impossibility, just to accurately define a simple, everyday cow, how incredibly hard is it to truly define the abstract concepts we argue about every single day? Things like truth, or justice, or success. So the next time you find yourself deep in a debate over a massive, complex topic, take a step back and ask yourself, have you truly defined your subject's lakshana? Or are you just pointing at the horns?